Do a voice check?
Well, we're on live now.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, we're broadcasting. So say hello to our audience.
Hi, everybody. I'm glad I behaved myself.
And we go back a few years now, don't we?
Quite a few years. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. When shall I use Lawrence? Or Swami?
Yeah.
When Swami and I met, we got into kind of a heated discussion about beings from other worlds. And I had made the claim that I was a contact experiencer. And Swami hadn't met one of those before.
I had my own ideas about it that time, yes. Very true.
And kind of like the way I started the show tonight, I think what you had mentioned to me is you had, after that conversation, experiences with of an unusual kind, keeping that subject alive with you. You want to tell me what happened?
There is so much. Give me a head start so I can begin to start from somewhere.
All right. Well, I remember at the time you had mentioned that people started calling you or emailing you or something. It was really quite not long after that initial heated conversation we had at a party at the Sharon Autobahn Center, if that's right.
Wow, you remember the place.
Yeah, Marianne Walker was one of the people that was there. There was a group of lovely people that were there, lovely young people. And they kind of got to see us get into I wouldn't say an argument, but it was definitely a strong conversation, because we had our opinions. But you saw me about a year or two later. We hadn't seen each other, and that's when you said that all of these people started bringing up the same subject of contact with aliens, and that's what I remember.
Yeah, I am one of those rare Swamis who believes in aliens, and well, the story goes a long time back where I was coming into the experience of this world, not necessarily from adolescence, but more from waking up. I don't know whether you want to use the word enlightenment. And I was reading lots of different scriptures. And one of the scriptures that I came across was very intriguing, and that was that God made us in His image and likeness.
Biblical.
Biblical.
Yeah.
I was born and raised a Catholic. I became a Hindu later, but not in a religious sense, but in an ethnic sense, because I was trained by the Swamis in the Himalayas. And the irony of it is that as I started reading it, I said, wait a minute, the universe doesn't look like God if God is in my image and likeness. So were they really talking about universe or an energy, or were they talking about another being that looked like me?
Yes.
And when I look at Adam and Eve, and I look at the way that God is supposed to have taken something from the rib of Adam and made Eve and all, that's genetics.
Yes.
That's something that we do today. So I put myself back 2,000 years and I said, wait a minute. If I was 2,000 years ago living on the planet, I would say the same thing that they're saying in Genesis. Because I would not have had the words to express that properly as I can do now. So the only possibility of my existence is that I was created by a higher form of intelligence. Mm-hmm. That was very much like what I have become today. Because through successive generations, I become more and more like the alien that created me. Now, I'm not saying that aliens created the universe. I say that the creator that created me, the creator of the humans, was also created by the creator of the universe.
Yes.
So there is a higher God.
Yes.
And maybe when you look at the Hindu scriptures and you look at the Devtas and the other terms that they use, they were talking about the aliens.
Now, I mean, I'm a little bit of a broad stroke thinker when it comes to various religions and ancient texts. And I think there's a group of texts from India called the Vedas. Is that the correct pronunciation?
Yeah.
Veda?
Veda means knowledge.
Knowledge.
The books of knowledge.
And from the Judaic traditions, there's, as a Christian I call it the Bible, but I think there are other
Like the
accounts,
Zohar and-
the Zohar. There are other accounts in the Judaic tradition, and then there's the Native American tradition, of which I know a little bit from here, this region, but also South America. You know, the Mayans and such. They have a very very deep written history. You know, one of the things that challenges Western thought or academia is the idea that writing is only 7,000 years old, and I guess the oldest writing was attributed to I guess Hindu or Sanskrit,
Yes.
among the oldest writing. But then you have also the Sumerians and the cuneiform. But the Mayans and the various cultures of South America and Central America also had script and writing, very mathematical, similar to cuneiform and hieroglyphics that Egypt had. And the reason I bring these documents up, these ancient stories, is they're ancient. They've been with us a long time. Some cases 2,000 years, some cases 8,000 years, and there's always this common theme that you have just described. This idea of the gods. The Greeks. I love the saying from the Greeks, which is you will rue the day if the gods, or when the gods, take an interest in you. Right? And roughly what that means is that it's not a good thing. When the gods take it, because the gods to the Greeks were like they had human personalities, but like on steroids. These were jealous, they were manipulative, they were tricksters, they were shapeshifters, they had very powerful technology, and they were bigger.
And the most important thing is they had a humanness about them. Especially when you look at Greek mythology, there is a humanness about these gods.
Yes.
They're not something that is not reachable. They are more like humans on steroids with immense powers.
Immense powers.
But let us not even reference that. Let us look at the facts the way they are today.
Okay.
Look at me. I am a person who has got an animal body, just like so many other animals living on this planet.
Yeah.
But there is nothing that I do which is the same as all the other animals. Everything that I create is created by breaking down the elemental structure of the earth and turning it into something totally different, totally alien. Look at the room around you, the mics, the table, the plastics, the synthetics, the camera, the lights, the walls. Everything is alien to the planet, which is more than convincing to anybody that I do not have the same structure as other living beings on this planet. There is not a single animal out there that will take something from the earth and turn it into something different. But everything that I do is something different.
Yeah.
I make clothes out of grass and cotton. I take everything of the earth, and everything that I possess is not of the earth. Even the food that I eat, I have to warm it and change its chemical structure so that it is adaptable to my body.
Yes.
Now, how can I say that I am a part of this planet when everything that I do is not of this planet? Or could it be that my DNA has transformed, and I think, I'm not going to quote any ancient astronaut theorists because I've never heard them say what I just said, but it's transformed because of some alien intervention of a higher intelligence that created a new species.
Yeah.
And the 10 Commandments and all these rules that they put on us, they did that because they found out, they realized with their power and intelligence that if we were left on our own, we would destroy the planet. That's why they said, don't covet your neighbor's wife, because we became sexually very potent, not like other animals. All animals have got a mating season, we don't.
Right.
Maybe that's the reason they said, do not covet your neighbor's wife. Do not covet your neighbor's goods. They found a whole new animal. And you know what? They have not been successful. Because we humans have become the biggest parasite that walks on this planet today. It's true. I know I'm not trying to be a traitor to my species, but look at the whole world. Look at the whole planet. Look at the whole earth. The only animal that survives is us. And we're destroying everything else. We are too superior for the other animals.
That's a valid and very true statement, but the only point that I would like to counter that with is that not all of us agree to the program that we're in. Not all of us. You know, there are very few humans actually doing the kinds of things that you're talking about, whereas the most of us are like the animals in a feedlot. You know, we are controlled from cradle to grave. We are programmed in schools, so there is a control paradigm or control structure that forms our thinking, forms our societies. We don't live naturally, as you were saying. We don't live naturally, and as some of my teachers had said up at Akwesasne and Cattaraugus, the two communities I lived with, they would say that humans are the least evolved. That the animals, the animals are more evolved because they don't need to change their environment. They carry, the turtle carries its home on its back. They don't need to cook their food, or there are predators and there are prey, and there are symbiotic relationships, and everything works together. There is this unity in the creation, and human beings stand out in that we don't know who we are or what we're doing in relative to all these other creatures. You know, the lions have claws, and we have fingernails, and so we're weak. We need to make weapons. Animals don't need to make weapons. They take care of themselves just fine. And where am I going with this? What I'm trying to say is that instinctively, we still have instinct, and we still desire a better behavior from our own species. A lot of us do, and that's my contention. We have made it this far, from civilization failure after civilization failure, and let me tell you, folks, when you have a civilization failure, it's not a good thing. There's, the Mayans. I saw this fellow. I want to put this thought to you, and then I want you to respond. I saw on the Joe Franklin show when I was maybe 11 years old. And Joe Franklin had a show much like this on Channel 11 WPIX out of New York City. I was in the suburbs. I was after school, 11 years old. And he had an archaeologist on, and the guy had goosebumps. He was shaking. He was white, white from being upset. And Joe Franklin was saying, well, what did you learn from the archaeological expeditions that you have just returned from? And he said, there were vast cities in Central America. There were vast cities, and there were vast populations, and they recorded in stone, they wrote in stone, much like the Sumerians in clay, what had happened to them. And he said what had happened was they had an infrastructure failure on a civilization scale level. And he said that they recorded what happened within 2 weeks. There was starvation and cannibalism, and it got really bad. And he said, look at our civilization today, how big it is, with millions upon millions of people living in these big, in small parts of the earth. We have enough room to feed everybody, but what are we doing? We're using trucks and petrochemicals to move food to the cities, and if any of these parts of our civilization fail, a domino effect. And what I'm saying, what I'm putting out to you is that how did we make it this far when we've done this before?
What happens, in my belief, first of all, we have to understand that we are running a program. We are not unevolved. We cannot say animals are more evolved than us. We are more evolved, but our evolution has taken a totally different path.
Yes. And
our evolution has taken a path towards the growth of a new species that may not be compatible to this planet. We are far more intelligent than all the other creatures, but we are also very dominant in the sense that we will not allow any other living creatures to come up or to grow in accordance with the laws of this earth. We will always bypass those laws, And that is this very reason why we are having a crisis today on this planet. We have 7 billion people,
Right.
and our instincts have not gone away. They've just shifted.
Yeah.
For example, in the wild, when we were in the forest, we were very protective. Instinctively, we would be ready for the fight and flight response, to try to get as much food as we can and stuff like that.
Yeah. Very
We have
Darwinian.
that.
Yeah.
We have that in the form of people trying to accumulate wealth. You look at a billionaire today, what does he need the billions for? There are some billionaires who are really using this mass amount of wealth that they have to structure society in the proper way, but there are others who are just trying to be rich for being rich sake.
Yeah.
And that is not proper. So our instincts have changed. Our fight and flight is more in a civilized society, having the same responses but suited to the climate that we are in at this moment.
Yeah.
So we have not lost that, we have modified those. But the problem that we face today is a problem of population. And let us face it, nobody wants to say it, everybody wants to be the good guy. But we have 7 billion people on this planet. When you have that many people, you start ending up with wars. The only way to stop wars is to educate people down to the bottom, at the bottom of the pyramid. People don't understand. They're still making more children, thinking if I have 10 children, I will be able to retire faster because these 10 children will take care of me in my old age, and it doesn't work that way. So we have to educate the people. There are two segments of society today. One is trying to just create the wars and reduce the population, which I'm not so much in favor of. The other segment is where you educate the people and try to cut down on the new generations coming up from spreading out into more people, rather making them collapse into becoming less people, because less is more.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the cities and all the other evolutionary structures that we're seeing as a result of this population here today are because our administrative abilities are not perfect. So in some places you find society having a wonderful life, in other places you find people still fighting.
Yeah.
This is the ego. When we start thinking collectively, and there are so many examples on this planet where we can learn from the ants. How well behaved they are. They work collectively. There are certain types of fishes that will move in groups. They function as a group.
Yeah.
So if we can use these, look at the bees, they work in groups. There's no individual, even though they have a leader.
Yes.
The output is that of the group. If we can learn to live as a group and allow individual egos to be put a step back, we will be very successful on this planet. I think the intelligence we have received as an evolving species should be used to harmoniously bring this planet back with respect for every living being that is there, for every living creature that is there on this planet. And we are very far away from that.
Well, and you bring up this kind of a thought of, you've reminded me that in a lot of these ancient stories, that humanity had a very high golden age where we were much more spiritually in tune with our environment, with the cosmic law, and our place in that cosmic law and our place on the earth, and we were magical beings. And one of the things that I am fascinated with, as I'm not a real student of the paranormal, but it's an interest, and let me put it this way, I've done informal survey of human beings, men and women, and the survey kind of goes like this. Do you dream is one question, and the other question is do unexplainable things happen to you in your life that are very mysterious? And just as a rough guess, how do you think that broke down in percentages of people who dream and have extraordinary experiences and people who don't? What do you think of how it breaks down?
I think I would be an exception rather than the rule, because my whole life is based on the paranormal. I have a lot of things happening to me. I have a lot of my students who actually write to me. I have at least 1 or 2 emails every 2-3 days telling me that they saw me coming to them in their dreams. and talking to them.
Uh-huh.
And which has led me to my own theories on the paranormal. And I manifest to people in different parts of the world. Now, in all truth, I am not consciously aware of it. But today, after listening to people and after connecting them, what they said to me and a timeline to where I was, I've realized that that is possibly true. And I believe that we all exist in different planes of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So there's the dream consciousness. There is a Jagat, in Sanskrit is the awakening, the conscious state. Swapna is the dreaming state, the subconscious.
Mm-hmm.
Nidra is the sleeping state, the unconscious. Then Turiya is the meditative state, the superconscious. There is also Samadhi, which is the soul consciousness. There is the spirit consciousness, there's God consciousness. There are different levels of consciousness. And through our evolutionary pattern of coming life after life onto this planet, we actually have evolved in some of these consciousness states more than others.
Yeah.
But when you are in one conscious state, you do not know what is happening in the other, and you don't remember it when you come back to conscious. So
Well, sometimes you do.
Sometimes
you
I
do.
will agree with you, yes. But I don't want to confuse the conversation.
Right.
So, most of the times that people told me that I came to them in their dreams was a time when I was in a type of a meditative, but more than meditative, a type of a drug state. I don't take drugs and I've not had a drink in 26 years. I've not smoked a cigarette in 27 years, and I was a vegetarian until recently. So, but I do go into a type of a euphoric stage, as if I have taken drugs.
Yes.
And I can't understand what it is. And I sometimes wonder whether it is blood sugar or high blood pressure or whatever it is. I always like to label things. And it is in these times that people see me.
Okay.
And I believe that if I can do it, so can everybody else. It is not, nobody is special that they have an ability that nobody else has. That comes from the ego. Okay? If my great-grandfather was here today, he would be amazed. He would not know this is the earth. He's not seen cameras, he's not seen planes, he's not seen CDs or computers or phones, nothing. He's not seen a building that is a 2 stories high traveling at 60 miles an hour on the road. We call them double-decker buses.
Yeah.
For him it will be a building with 40 people. He's not seen a bird made of metal with 800 people in it. He's not even seen the other side of the world.
Yes.
Okay? So for me, I always say the miracles of today are the science of tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, so to tie this thought back together, the result of my survey was about 50% of the people I've asked this, it breaks down 50%, have extraordinary events in their lives that they can't explain, and they're good dreamers, and the other 50% are like, no, life is just, absolutely normal. Normal in the way we perceive in our waking state. It's absolutely, nothing. And I find this interesting because I think that this demonstrates how our group thought, like you're talking with the group of bees or ants, they have a consciousness that is shared. We don't have that anymore. And perhaps we never did, or perhaps we've lost something, or it was removed because of these other players in the universe. Because my contention is that life is the rule, not the exception. I think that there is so much out there that it's impossible for us to be the only game in town.
Carl Sagan said it very beautifully, and I'm paraphrasing him here because he said it would be insane to believe that with such a vast universe that we have today, life only belonged to this planet. So it is impossible to be, it is ludicrous for me to believe, now I'm talking about myself, it's ludicrous for me to believe that there's this small little planet called Earth which holds life, and there's this huge universe that we cannot even fathom with our minds, and there is no life over there. That's not possible.
Yeah, not possible.
There are definitely millions and millions of forms of living beings all over the universe. And maybe there's not one, but there are more universes.
Of Of course.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we cannot even think about reaching the end age of this universe in our present state of evolution. So we have become intelligent, and if you really look at the history of the evolution of man, somewhere down the line there was this sudden drop, a blank state. Charles Darwin calls it the missing link. And it is from there that suddenly we have humans. We could not have evolved overnight into this. Evolution does not make sense. So there was, I call it intervention. There was a divine intervention, or there was an alien intervention, or there was some form of intervention that gave us this spurt of intelligent growth and made us human.
Yeah. I've looked into this a great deal, and I was fascinated with the Neanderthal people who lived with us until pretty recently. In historical terms, 30,000 years ago, there were still good populations of Neanderthals, and because we have their grave sites, we have the evidence of them, and they are different than us, significantly different than us, and yet they share 99% of our DNA, very close, but very different. The thing about this idea of where we came from has to be thought about with this concept in mind. It's called genohomeostasis. And what genohomeostasis means is a horse is a horse. A horse cannot evolve into another animal. It's like just because bears are swimming in the ocean, it doesn't mean that bears can evolve or change into whales. They're both mammals, they both swim in the ocean, but whales are whales, bears are bears, and part of the flaw that Darwin had in his theory of evolution is that because of survival and changing environments, living creatures would adapt and morph and change. The only problem is the fossil record shows very clearly that, yes, you do have animals that evolve over time. Like, you can clearly see horses many million, or a couple million years ago, or many million years ago, had 3 toes that fused and became 1 toe. That is in the fossil record, but it was still a horse. And the thing is a duck is a duck. A duck can't breed with a chicken. It stays a duck. A chicken stays a chicken. And the thing about chickens that's really interesting, folks, you're going to like this. Chickens have been around since before the dinosaurs. Chickens are a very ancient bird. And chickens have been chickens this whole time. So, what does that genealogical fact bring out about the idea of monkeys turning into humans? There's a problem
one
here.
point there, however, and that takes me back to what I was talking about,
Yeah.
which is the intervention.
The intervention.
So we know today that we can create a whole new species by manipulating the DNA of certain species. So you can have, there are so many vegetables and fruits today which are man-made.
Yes.
Because they took different things from different fruits or whatever, and they created a new product. So we humans are like that. Our verbal skills, our ability to speak the way we speak, is not found in any other animals. There are dolphins and whales that communicate, but we are so much more evolved in the intelligence that goes into the communication that we produce.
Well, Dr. Lilly would take issue with you. Dr. Lilly, through the 1970s and 80s, did extensive studies with communications with dolphins. And he calls dolphins the humans of the sea. And they do, in fact, have languages. And it was a dolphin that broke the code for him and got out of the water and said, hello, one day. And he was able to communicate with dolphins. He took a lot of ridicule. Because the message from the dolphins was, you got to stop wrecking the ocean, guys. We live here, kind of a thing.
No, I do agree with you on that, but I'm talking about the rate. I mean, a dolphin coming out of the water and saying hello, and a dolphin having a type of a communication even with its own species.
Yes.
In the way that we have today, no, it's
different.
like earth and sky. That's what I'm saying. So there has been something that has bumped us into what we are today. I also sincerely believe that we are being watched by the gods. Now, I'm not talking about God of the universe.
Right.
I'm talking about God, the creator of humans. That we are being looked at. We are like a goldfish in a bowl. I would not like to feel that way, but the truth is that we are.
Yeah.
And I believe that we are an experiment. And if we do it right, something beautiful will come out of it. But the most important thing at the end of the day, after all that is said and done, is let's somewhat understand where we have come from. But even if we cannot, what is more important is try to understand where we are going to.
Yes.
So now when we change the whole, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So when you change the whole perspective, where are we going to right now? And I don't want to be a Mr. Doom and Gloom, but we do need to stop as a human race, and we need to reconsider what it is that we want. There are many factions in politics and religion and what have you that have their own ideas of what we should be like. But nobody is doing it with the intention of helping the human race. Everybody is self-centered and trying to get their own part of the pie. We need to get together as humans and work for the benefit of this whole planet. We need to do it with love.
Yeah.
And we need to do it with an understanding that if we are going to evolve and grow, if the future generations that are coming tomorrow are going to benefit from us, then we have to do it with love. And I don't see that happening. Not in the elections, not in anything else that's going on around here. It's all about I.
Yeah, hold that thought. Paula, where are we with time?
Oh, there's the clock.
And that's the correct time?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I have to be very precise tonight. I have to leave exactly at 8, sadly. I have something I have to do. Okay, so here's another thing that comes to me. All right, I'm a thinker, and I meditate in everything that I do. You know, I studied a little martial arts, so when I'm doing my tree work or carpentry, I try to use body movements that don't harm me, especially with the injuries in my back and this kind of thing. But also, I'm always thinking. And I had this really funny thought one day, and it kind of really it disturbed me. And the idea that I had goes like this. All right, so you have human beings, and we've come out of the cave and out of the mud huts, and we went into houses, and then eventually we're in high-rises, and now we have airplanes, and we're going into space, and we're doing all this stuff, and we have computers, which are like an extension of our minds. Okay, we have these computers, and the basic language of all computers, binary, is zeros and ones,
On and off.
on and off. And I thought about this, and I'm going, well, that's pretty simple. And then I had this kind of alarming thought that, well, who says that DNA and life started in the ocean and crawled out onto the land and eventually became man who makes computers? Maybe out there in space, atoms are colliding together and it's just ones and zeros. That's a lot simpler of a life form is a machine. Machines are much simpler. And why can't machines have assembled themselves in the vast expanse of the universe, and perhaps what created life as we know it on this planet was a machine intelligence, and now we're creating machine intelligence that might communicate with that again? I don't know. It was just a strange thought.
The only problem with that thought is that there are two things I would like to say. One is that a machine would have to have something behind it to operate it. So machine does not work on its own. And I say this for a reason, unless our definition of the word machine is different. And I say this for a reason because a machine is a highly efficient function. It's an object that functions very efficiently,
Yeah.
but not very intelligently because it needs to be programmed.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I can tell a machine to do a particular function, and it can do it a zillion times faster than I would be able to do it. But I have to program it to do that. You understand? So even if there were machines that created all this, behind that machine would be the creator.
Okay, hold that thought. So I want to challenge that thought because I worked in a factory, a place called New York Twist Drill, and one of my high school buddies, Mike Rushak, worked there too. He was older than me, and he got involved with calibrating those very kinds of machines. And he was describing how each of these machines does something to them. We were making drill bits. So you're cutting pieces of metal, that's violent. You're grinding the flute in the twist, right? So that's grinding the metal. Everything, I'm heat treat. That's where I was. I was in heat treat. So I was tempering the steel, with thousands of degrees of molten salt, I mean, that's violence. And so he was talking about how there's so much violence in these factories. But the other thing that he talked about is machine intelligence. And we were riding together coming home from work today. I said, what are you talking about? These are just World War II era machines. They're not programmable. They're totally mechanical. You set them up, they do a run, 10,000 run, and when the machines were new, they were doing 40,000 or 100,000 tasks per run. But now, they were so old that they had to be recalibrated to work properly every 10,000 pieces. So that was the discussion. But what he said was, I always talk nice to my machines, and I get 5,000 more run out. I get 15,000, not 10,000 like the other guys. I said, really, Mike? What's going on here? And he goes, well, the machines talk to me. Okay. He says, well, what are you hearing? He says, it's not like they talk to me, but I hear them. And he says, and he tells me this story about how the machines were talking to him. They liked him because he cared about them, and that they know that they're not smart, and they work 24 hours, 7 days a week. They never get a break like humans, and they can do that. And they break down, and they have good days and bad days. And I'll attest to this because there was one worker got really angry with his machine. And whatever it was, he came back to it after everything was working for a while, and as he was walking by, it spit a piece of metal and hit him. And Mike was saying, he says, they know they're not as smart as us, but they want to be acknowledged. And so I had to really wrestle. How could this be? They're just like this table. They're just objects, although they're made out of metal. This was 1978. These were not computer driven yet. They were World War II. They were very old machines. And so I fast forward a little bit and I tell this same story to one of my elders. And she goes, well, they're alive. I said, well, Grandma, what do you mean? She goes, well, all right, take your car, for example. It has an electrical system. That's like your nerves, right? You're the brain. You're telling it everything what to do. But it has fuel, so it eats. And it poops because it has to let the exhaust go out. So it eats and it excretes. It moves. It has all the signs of life that we're taught about. So, and how many cars have you had that were either really rotten to you or really nice to you? And I said, yeah, I often feel that my car has a personality because of the care I put into it. It gives back to me. And so her contention is that everything is alive. Everything is alive because everything is made out of electricity, electrons.
Not electrons. That's exactly what I was saying. When you start chunking it down, everything is alive.
Yes.
But when you're looking at a machine and saying that it is alive, I'm not disputing the fact that it is capable of creating a function. I actually have written a book called The Three Environments.
Okay.
In the three environments, and this book is going to be released very soon, it's already copyrighted.
Oh, great.
I say that there are three environments in which everything exists. First is the external environment. So the external environment right now would be the studio.
Okay.
It has got length, width, and height, which gives the volume. It has got parameter. The parameter is the floor, the ceiling, and the four walls.
Yes, the container.
The container.
Yeah.
And there are objects. The objects create a function. They can be animate or inanimate. The lights, the sound, the stabilizers, all these are animate because they work with an energy.
Yeah.
The table is inanimate.
I get you.
There is gross and there is subtle. The air in this room, which needs to move around and circulate, is subtle. There's gross and subtle. There is animate and inanimate. There is so many different types of objects over here.
Yeah.
Okay? And I use these to tell people how to change the physical environment, external environment. But I will stop here because it gets very detailed.
Okay.
And let's go to the physiological environment, which is my body. I have the cephalocaudal, which is the height. I have the dorsoventral, which is the width, and the length and the width. And the other one is the lateral. So these are the three dimensions of my physical body.
Yes.
Okay. The parameter of this physical body is the skin.
Okay.
And everything that is contained within the skin are objects that are for a function. If the object is not in the right mode for the proper homeostasis, or whatever is the right word to call it, then it becomes dysfunctional. Or if it is not serving a purpose, it is called vestigial.
Ah, yeah.
The same, if I put a kitchen table in the middle and have soup and something cooking right here in the studio, it's dysfunctional. It's not meant to be in a studio, it's meant to be in a kitchen.
Yes.
Okay? So, it is important to understand that we have environments. And the third environment is the internal environment. And the internal environment, I cannot talk about the dimensions because it's a non-physical entity. But there are objects inside. And we have thoughts, feelings, and desire located in the three different parts of our body.
Yes.
And these are the brains. I would like to use the word brains, but it's also the heart. And these are the ones that contribute to the functioning of the internal environment.
Yeah.
And the internal environment has got objects: anger, greed, lust, pride. There's also positive like joy and peace and love. So when you bring all these together and you understand how the communication takes place between the physiological and the external environment, which is normally done with the help of the five sense organs,
Right.
or how the communication takes place between the physiological and the internal environment, which is normally done by collapsing these five sense organs, because you have to disconnect from them in order to be able to perceive from the inside. Then you have a very functional unit of the human, which is me, because I am the person responsible for what happens in the external environment, and I can only make it happen properly by accessing the internal environment. And that's where meditation comes in.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought this very beautiful idea out, because I study similarly, but I came to it for another reason. Well, one of the things that I started studying was the atmosphere and what's going on, and there are very, very great scientists, Nikola Tesla and Wilhelm Reich and Trevor Constable. And these guys in the 1940s and 50s were commandeered. They were conscripted by the U.S. military. So you guys are working for us right now. We want to know what's in the air. What is our atmosphere? So these are some of the brightest scientists and physicians Trevor Constable was a photographer, among other things, and so he was given the task of using the latest photography called infrared film in the 1940s to photograph the sky and see what he could find. And by gosh, he found extraordinary structures that he called sky critters. They're like, they had heat signatures just like the body that you're talking about, with the parameter and the internal organs, and then the invisible structures, you know, the mind, heart, spirit, what have you. There's also heat. We emanate heat. And so today we have cameras that can see the heat signature in pitch black. They can see how many people are standing there, this kind of thing. Okay. So he was looking at, wow, okay, the atmosphere is invisible, you know, mostly except for, say, clouds and blue, but there's a whole other thing going on that is outside of our range of vision. Nikola Tesla was working on the energy, like you were talking about, of the body of the Earth, and how the magnetism and the body of the Earth affect weather, for example. Wilhelm Reich was into the very subtle energies of life energy. And I'm going to have to wrap this up. So the idea being is that these functions that you're talking about are also expressed by our whole planet, and that we're on a living, conscious thing, and we kind of need to reconnect 7 billion humans into that TV station, so to speak.
Yes.
All right, so we have to close down our show now, and I would like to thank Swami Kripananda to coming to our show, and thank you for such I wish I had another hour to go with you, but I got to go and take care of something right now. And will you come back?
I would love to. I would love to. I like the way we actually communicated today with no fixed focus in mind, but just allowed everything to flow.
Yeah.
I like the way we did that. But maybe when we come the next time, we can have something.
Well, you'll have your book.
I will bring my books along. Yeah, I got 1 or 2 of them right now.
Well, I always, if you have anything like that, or art or whatever, I always like to show our viewers your talents and all of my guests' talents. And I love that that you have such a good, strong message. It's not an easy message. We got to do better, folks. As a species, we have to do better. It's not a choice. It's a demand.
And like we say, let it begin with me.
I hope.
Thank you.
Thank you.